We should be ready to go.
Sweet.
We'll just give everyone a few minutes to trickle in.
Yeah. Give her a minute to watch the ads.
I've wanted to disable those on my channel, but I don't think there's a way to.
No, we've chatted with the Twitch people, and it sounds like they might be able to behind like on their end,
Mhm.
but then they would always be disabled. You wouldn't have the option of switching them on and off.
Yeah, it would just be nice to have like an education mode or something where you flip a switch and then ads disabled, subscriptions disabled until you re-enable it, like the next stream.
Right? That would be super nice.
Feels almost like a missed opportunity, honestly, now that the pandemic's starting to sort of wind down.
Yep.
We're
I
still here for
agree.
a few more months, but
I agree 100%. This is awesome. History of VTubing.
yeah, I divided it into two parts. So one was going over the history, the development of VTubing, how we've gotten from the sort of proto VTubers to the present day, and then as well as what can you do to become a VTuber yourself? What are the sort of roadblocks in your way of becoming a VTuber, and how you can actually start on your own development of a VTuber avatar.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm excited. I'm gonna make my own VTuber avatar of this summer. It's gonna
Yeah,
be
it's
amazing.
if you want to go the 2D route, there's some. I have some information in here though. That one's a little bit more difficult, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to go the 3D route.
Hmm.
Do something weird. I mean, if you're gonna VTube, do something weird, right?
Exactly. I can see
That felt good.
my friends have found my channel.
Awesome.
I'm gonna turn off alerts for the stream. I think turn them
Yeah, I
back
usually do.
on
I
another
usually turn
time.
them off. Yeah, I turn them off in my classes so they're not just like popping up all the time. Plus, I never want to like advertise
Yeah, exactly.
as the teacher ever advertise like subs. Drives me nuts when students sub and
Do,
then they
I
do it
I
because they
just
know it's
don't.
supposed
I
to
don't
be.
even like it when other people advertise my subs. Like I've been in collabs where people have been like, "Did you know you can Twitch Prime sub to with your Prime Gaming or whatever?" And I was like, "I'm good. I
Yeah,
don't need to shill for me."
yeah, exactly. What would be a good VTuber hashtag on Twitter?
There's a lot of them. So in terms of like community hashtags, there's VTuber EN, which I believe is the English speaking VTuber. Or no, sorry, VTuber EN is for Japanese content that's been translated into English. EN VTuber is for English VTubers and all sorts of their content. Each person typically has a set of tags. So they have like a normal discussion tag, they have a meme tag, and they'll have an art tag. And if there's some sort of adult content, they'll usually have a separate tag for that as well so people can filter it out.
What's VTuber Uprising?
That was a promotion hashtag that came out, I think, mid last year, where people were talking about the sort of growth of VTubers, and everyone used it to kind of self promote. And you
Oh,
could use it to find other VTubers as well. Okay, I think that should be enough time for everyone to have filtered in. That was about 5 minutes, so we can get started. I think.
all right, let's do it.
Okay, so hello, everyone. Welcome to my lecture. My name is Aiden. I am the teaching assistant for EAE 4900, 6900 game streaming. And I have a lecture really quick about the history of VTubing. This is kind of my area of expertise. And so we're going to talk about everything that's happened to actually allow VTubing to start to exist. We're going to talk about the development of the scene from 2016 when the first VTubers debuted up until the present day. We're also going to talk about how you can actually become a VTuber and what that process looks like, what are your barriers to entry, and how you can actually sort of expand into that. So, first things first, I want to talk about the sort of proto VTubers. VTubing is a much more recent phenomenon than people expect. It only started in about 2016 in its current form. However, the idea of this sort of live motion capture has been a thing for years. There's been a few different technologies that have come out most notably the Microsoft Kinect and things like Face Rig that allow you to actually transpose your body or your face onto a virtual avatar in some way, shape, or form. These were kind of very immature technologies and they weren't really used to their fullest, but these kind of provided the baseline for people to start exploring using virtual avatars in this sort of space. This is VTubing is kind of an extension of the virtual idol concept, which is just brought to life. If you're familiar with bands like Gorillaz or Hatsune Miku and Vocaloid culture in general, you'll be very aware of this sort of virtual idol. And this concept actually started even way back in the 90s with groups like Deltron 3030, which had virtual characters, animated music videos, storylines going along with their music, and sort of bringing these characters to life. But when we talk about who is the first person to use a virtual avatar, we need to draw a distinction. Having a virtual avatar does not necessarily make you a VTuber. While it is one element of it, there's a lot more to VTubing than just having an avatar and moving around with it. To me, VTubing exists in a three-part space, and this is a tripartite definition, so we're going to go over each part one by one. So first and foremost, a virtual avatar has to represent the character or actor in content. It doesn't have to be in all of your content, but you do need to have a virtual avatar that represents you at some point or another. If you don't have a virtual avatar, you're not really a virtual YouTuber. The virtual avatar should also be captured in real time. It can be touched up after, but it needs to be based on that real-time capture from the person controlling the avatar. There are a lot of groups that have done sort of pre-recorded or hand-animated things, and while this is interesting, it doesn't really line up with what people expect from a VTuber. You'll always see the VTuber avatar moving around as the person does things. You'll notice when I move my head, you can see my avatar move in real time. You can also see my lip sync happen with all the words that I say, things like that. VTubers must acknowledge also in some way that they are virtual in spite of being controlled by a real person. There are people who have used virtual avatars as a replacement for their real life self, but they don't acknowledge the fact that they are in any way a virtual being, that they're, a entity that exists outside of the sort of real world. If you're familiar with the concept of the magic circle in games, similar thing exists for VTubing. Immersion, exactly. So I've created an alignment chart for determining who the first VTuber is, and I've divided it into two sections. There's the form and the presentation. In terms of the form, it's, is there a 3D or 2D model? Is it entirely digital? Is it acted out by a human? But in terms of the presentation, it's, does the character acknowledge their existence as a virtual being? Do they create content as the character they portray that's related to the character they portray? And so I've created an alignment chart of sort of the 4 prototypical VTuber or virtual entities. The common joke in the VTuber community is that the annoying orange was really the first sort of example of this kind of content. Annoying orange was very much prototype. It was a human face superimposed onto an orange, but it does feature a lot of what we expect to see from a VTuber in the real world. It's live content that's been copied over onto a model that represents a character. It's definitely not the first VTuber, but it is one of those prototype things that led to the development of VTubing. Ami Yamato, in the form purist presentation anarchist category, is definitely the closest thing to a real VTuber that came out of this early era of content creation. Ami Yamato uses a virtual avatar for every single thing that she does. All of her vlogs are done with the virtual avatar. However, she doesn't acknowledge the fact that she's virtual. In fact, that is one of the main parts of her content, that she is using this as a representation of her in real life self and as a physical person, not as a character or anything like that. Weatheroid Type A Irie is also another good example of this prototype VTuber thing, where this was actually a 3D model that was motion captured in real time that would provide information about the weather in Japan. And this went on for about 8 years before she transitioned into being an actual VTuber character. But because this used pre-recorded lines and was not, representing a character, it was just to present the weather in a more interesting way. Again, doesn't really fall into the VTuber category. Kizuna Ai is the person who most represents the prototypical VTuber. She's also the person who coined the term virtual YouTuber, which is turned into VTuber, an all-encompassing term for people who stream or create content as a virtual avatar. So we're going to talk about VTubing in terms of 2 real epochs of VTubing. We're going to talk about pre-Hololive and post-Hololive. it's really hard to talk about VTubing without mentioning the massive amount of influence that HoloLive and their growth has had on VTubing and VTuber culture in general. The thing is that before HoloLive really blew up, there was a completely different culture to VTubing in general. And post HoloLive, we've seen a big shift in how content is presented and how we actually interact with VTuber content. In terms of the pre-HoloLive era, we saw a lot of pre-recorded, semi-scripted content. Most VTubers were doing YouTube videos in the sort of traditional sense. They would do vlog-style content, Let's Plays, things like that. This is sort of the hallmark of whether you're or not you are a VTuber who sort of debuted before HoloLive became a big thing. There's also a big emphasis on 3D models, and we didn't really see a lot of collaboration between VTubers prior to HoloLive's kind of rise to prominence. There were some collabs, but they were few and far between. Most VTubers focused on their own solo content or content within their company, using other avatars or other characters from the same company that they were in. In the sort of post-HoloLive or the current HoloLive era of VTubing, we see a lot of emphasis on the live stream content, on game streaming, on just chatting streams. Content has moved from being this sort of pre-recorded, scripted content to more in-the-moment, easily monetizable content. Content that you can get out the door very quickly without having a lot of the production overhead of those sort of pre-recorded videos. There's also a much more heavy emphasis on 2D models and a heavy focus on collaboration. We saw a shift sometime around 2018, 2019 from that sort of 3D model focus onto the 2D, and that's something that continues to this day, where even VTubers now, who started as 3D VTubers, are moving towards 2D. And we do see some movement back the other way, but it's mostly 3D to 2D. We're going to talk about the timeline of VTubing and sort of the major events that happened in each year as we talk about the history. So, first things first, in 2016, Kizuna Ai debuted, and this was the start of virtual YouTubers or VTubers in general. Kizuna Ai was the first real megastar of VTubing. She currently has 4.5 million subscribers across both of her channels, making her by far the biggest content creator in the VTuber space. She debuted in late 2016, in November 2016, and almost immediately went on to blow up beyond anyone's wildest imaginations. She is also the VTuber with potentially the most sponsorships. She has become an ambassador for Japan in a lot of their dealings. I believe she's also an ambassador for the Japanese Olympics, but she's also been sponsored by Nissan Cup Noodles. She's had collaborations with Azur Lanes. She is a Japanese National Tourism Official ambassador. She has become sort of the face of VTubing in Japan and to the wider world outside of Japan. She also was the first person to really parlay her career as a VTuber or as a YouTube content creator into a successful music career, where nowadays she may even be more well known for her work as a musician than her work as a VTuber. She's also known affectionately in the Japanese community as Oyabun, or Big Boss. She is sort of the figurehead of the entire movement and someone who's still very well respected. One thing to note about Kizuna Ai is her agency also tried at one point to replace the voice actress for the character, which is something that we hadn't seen before, and it caused a lot of backlash. This has led to people sort of determining the character as not just being the avatar, but also the person behind the avatar. And this kind of helps us think about what VTubers really are. It's not just an avatar on a screen or a character in a show, it is a person, just represented by a sort of virtual avatar. And we have a clip really quick of her introduction video where she actually coins the term virtual YouTuber for the first time, so we'll just let that play.
見えてますか？聞こえてるかな？はじめまして。私の名前はキズナアイです。どうぞよろしくお願いします。普通の YouTuber と違うぞと思ったそこのあなた。なかなか鋭い。私実は2次元なんです。あれ？ 3D だから3次元？まあとりあえずバーチャルってことで、バーチャル YouTuber って響きかっこよくないですか？そんな感じで私はみんなとちょっと違うんです。だから興味があります。人間のみんなたくさん知りたい、仲良くなりたい、そんなことを考えて YouTube を始めてみました。私もみんなが楽しんでくれるようにライブ配信とか未来っぽい感じの VR とか新しいことにどんどんチャレンジしていきますから。そしていつか CM に出たいです。人気のある YouTuber さんって CM 出てるじゃないですか。あんな感じの人気者になりたいです。そしたらみんなともっとつながれるし、方向性としては間違えてないですよね。私にできることとかやってほしいことがあったらどんどんリクエストしてくださいね。そんな私の i チャンネル、皆さん応援よろしくお願いします。バーチャル YouTuber キズナアイでした。またねー。
So, what you just watched there is literally the first piece of VTuber content that was ever released onto the internet. This was November of 2016. This is the genesis of all VTuber content moving forward. And Kizuna Ai is notable not just for being the first major VTuber, but also the person who coined the term in the first place. So everyone who is a VTuber owes a lot to Kizuna Ai, who kind of paved the way, and also showed that it's possible to be successful even outside of the realm of YouTube, Twitch, as a content creator and as a virtual content creator. Next, we need to talk about the debut of the original Big Four, or the Big Five, or the Four Heavenly Kings, or however you want to refer to them. This is also the first time that we saw a kind of growth in VTubers. By the end of 2017, there were over 2,000 VTubers in some way, shape, or form who identified as VTubers, almost exclusively out of Japan. The Four Heavenly Kings, also known as the Big Four, are the four biggest VTubers outside of Kizuna Ai at the time that the term was coined. So this is back in about 2018, early 2019, and a lot of them are still fairly large content creators to this day. The four people we're talking about are Kaguya Luna, Mirai Akari, Nekomasu, and Deno Shoujo Shiro, who are all pioneers in their own way as well. They all have done something that has kind of led the way for other VTubers to follow in their footsteps. They're also some of the first virtuals to really collaborate outside of their companies as well. Kaguya Luna, Mirai Akari are known for collaborating with each other despite not being represented by the same organization. Shiro has collaborated with a lot of English YouTubers and even done some content that's fully in English as well, making her one of the first VTubers to really embrace the English side of the audience as well. And we'll get to why Nekomasu is important later. So, like I said, Shiro was actually the first virtual or VTuber to ever appear at an IRL event. She was at E3 2018, appearing in some content, and this kind of paved the way for other VTubers to appear at other events. When I visited Tokyo Game Show in 2018, there were multiple booths that had VTubers that were being controlled and interacting with the audience in person. She's also pretty fluent in English. She's done multiple videos fully in English. She's done collaborations with English YouTubers, and is really one of the first VTubers to kind of show that there is an audience for English content. Kaguya Luna was the first VTuber to ever host a television show, which has now become a common thing in Japan. She hosted a show called Talkin' on the Moon on NHK back in 2018, and that kind of paved the way for even some panel shows that are run entirely by VTubers. In the States, we may be a few years away from seeing VTubers in this sort of television presenter role, but in Japan, it's already a thing that's happening quite a bit. Mirai Akari was the first to appear at Nico Cho Party, which is a major event hosted by Dwango, the owners of Nico Nico Doga, essentially the YouTube of Japan. They're typically focused on viral internet videos and songs, especially Vocaloid-related content, but Mirai Akari's appearance in 2018 also led to them having more virtual YouTuber talent at these events and growing the scene even more. And finally, Nekomasu is what's known as the biggest Babi Niku VTuber. Babi Niku means anime-style female avatar, but a male user. It comes from the phrase virtual Bishoujo Juniku, which means virtual girl incarnation. These characters may use a voice changer, but they may not. It's not a super popular term outside of Japan, but it also showed that it's possible to be successful no matter what your avatar looks like or how you act using that avatar. I do have some quick clips of each of the characters. This is Kaguya Luna from one of the first ever VTuber concerts. This is recorded back in 2018 and kind of set the stage for a lot of what current VTuber agencies are doing. If you're familiar with Hololive, you may be aware that they do a concert series every year featuring all of their talent, and even Kizuna Ai is now doing an English tour. You'll also notice that all of these early VTubers have very strong personalities in some way, shape, or form. They kind of grew off the back of this sort of ridiculous personality mixed with their avatar. We're going to skip across this one. This is Mirai Akari. I don't want to get DMCA'd, and I forgot that I put this in here, but Mirai Akari was one of the largest VTubers. She's signed to a big agency called Entum at the time, and she ended up releasing the song during one of her anniversaries, and this ended up becoming the theme song to a few different video games, including a Groove Coaster game that released in the US. Yeah, as chat says, for that Beyond the Moon concert, they actually sold virtual tickets as well as tickets to watch the show in an actual theater. Since then, we've had more hybrid events, including Kizuna Ai doing a concert in the same way that the Miku Expos are held, where she is projected as a virtual avatar on a stage using hologram technology. It's sort of the extension of that virtual idol concept being brought to life by people who are actually controlling the avatars in real time. Sort of a hybrid of, the Tupac hologram at Coachella and an actual concert. I'm going to skip this so I don't get DMCA'd. Nekomasu is actually, yes, the first English VTuber is in chat right now. We'll get to that in a little bit. Nekomasu is a character who doesn't really exist in the same way that they did in the past. However, you'll notice something interesting as soon as you hear them talk. Nekomasu is a male VTuber using a female avatar. He was really the first person to do this, and at the time ended up growing pretty large. He's not particularly notable anymore, however, at the time this was something that no one had really seen before, and this has paved the way for a lot of VTubers who do the same thing to this day. And Shiro is also completely fluent in English to an extent.
I post a video daily on YouTube from Blue Butter World. Today's video I made is for someone who are interested in Japan, who wants to go to Japan, but have no idea.
Shiro is mostly known for her skills at video games, but also for interacting with the English community to more of an extent than really any other VTubers. We'll move on as well. So here I have a quick chart for you showing sort of the relationship of these early VTubers. This was from March 2018. This is, I think, every VTuber at the time who had more than 1,000 subscribers. And you'll see a lot of the people we've already talked about here, and some people that we will talk about in the future on this chart already. In the center, you can see the big five all centered around Kizuna Ai, who at the time was the biggest. You can see Ami Yamato towards the top as one of the pioneers of sort of virtual content creation. And towards the bottom, you'll see the start of HoloLive. You'll see a few characters that you may recognize there, including Roboco. There's also a few other VTubers on this chart who have still continued creating content to this day, the most notable one being Nem, who's a character on the far right. I don't know if you can see my cursor, actually. But she has actually done collaborations with members of Japanese Parliament, showing just how far the reach of VTubing has gone outside of... You can see the cursor? Okay, perfect, yeah. She's right there. She's still active to this day. She does a lot of information about VTubing and VR technology for a Japanese audience, and has also done collaborations with VTubers outside of Japan as well. In 2018, we started to see the first English VTubers debut, the formation of the first major agencies and groups, including Update, the Aileen Fam, Zig, etc., as well as the start of HoloLive and Niji Sanji, who are kind of the biggest groups as of today. In terms of international VTubers, the first English VTuber is actually someone named Mira Pink, who was in chat earlier. She's also the person who created My Model. She is sort of the inspiration for all other English VTubers, and really the first person to have ever done it. The scene developed very slowly. There were less than 100 English VTubers by 2019, and less than 300 still by 2020. And there's a reason for this. The biggest hurdle for entry for English-speaking people who wanted to get into VTubing was a lack of translation of Japanese tools. In the early days, the industry was centered entirely in Japan, and a lot of the tools weren't really localized at all. If you didn't speak any Japanese, it was pretty much impossible to actually use any of these tools in the same way that a Japanese content creator would be able to. That all sort of changed with the release of Tracking World by Deet Rathius, which was the first native English-speaking program and is still widely used by VR content creators to this day. It was based on Unity, which is kind of the de facto standard for all VTubing capture applications at the moment, and allows you to record videos in VR as you're controlling the avatar. You can still look at the desktop, you can see your screen, you can reposition cameras. It was a program that allowed you to make that sort of pre-recorded content. Some English VTubers also ended up signed to Japanese agencies during these early days. While these agencies are now defunct and the characters no longer exist, I thought it would be remiss to not mention some of the really early pioneers: Caroline Brown, who was signed to Winx, Kocho Momiji from Ryu Seigun, and Otonashi Rhythm, who was actually signed to Kizuna Ai's agency Update. None of these characters are around today, and we won't be showing any of their content, but it's important to mention the people who kind of paved the way for English-speaking VTubers to end up on corporate contracts. We have a quick clip here of Mira Pink, who is the first English VTuber.
Wahoo! Hi guys! Wahoo! It's me, Mira!
So,
as you probably read from the title,
one of the things that I want to point out about Mira is that she is also one of the people who really helped a lot of people, myself included, actually start doing this sort of content. At the time, I believe Mira was using a custom Unity capture to actually record all of her videos and content, and the same one that I ended up using to start my career as a VTuber. It's important to look back at the people who kind of actually started out this content. I'll also show a quick video from Deet, who is sort of one of the crazy masterminds behind a lot of the 3D tracking software that is still used to this day. Here he is explaining VC Face, which is the current 3D standard. It's the program that I use that has full expression detection, can import models, and they created their own custom avatar format to allow you to use Unity bundles in the program. Deet is also notable as the first French VTuber.
New tutorial. It's finally here, the new VSF avatar format. For the people who are using VC Face, this is a new avatar format that allows a lot more things, including shaders, custom animations, particles, and others. First, I will explain how they work on a technical aspect. If you just want to learn how to make them, you can...
So, I'll include links to all their channels after the end of this, and it's very important to note Deet is not in this alone. Emiliana, another early pioneer of VTubing, also works on VC Face, and between the two of them, they have kind of made 3D VTubing get to the state where it is today, at least in the West. Really quick, I have another chart similar to the one from the Japanese VTubers showing the English VTubing scene at around the same time in 2018. As you can see from the chart, it is a significantly smaller community, and unfortunately, many of the VTubers who are on this chart are no longer active. Both the members of Winx at the top of the screen are no longer active. Rhythm Otonashi and Marie Klein towards the middle are no longer active. Kocho Momiji in the top left is no longer active as well. And there are a lot of people on this chart who still are active. Mira Pink, for instance, Bunny, who is in the chat right now as well. These are all sort of the people who helped to pioneer the scene, and a lot of them are still making content to this very day. Finally, in 2019, the last of the sort of pre-Hololive epoch of VTubing, we need to talk about Virtual-san wa Miteru, or Virtual-san is Looking, and Hololive's expansion. The main reason we need to talk about this is because this is really the first exposure that a lot of people in the US had to VTubers, because this was a television anime featuring virtual characters. It featured the 6 members of Virtual Real, some of whom we've talked about before: Mirai Akari and Nekomiya Hinata from Entom, Shiro from Dot Live, Tsukino Mito from Niji Sanji, and Hime Hina, who are an independent duo of VTubers. This was shown on Crunchyroll. You could actually watch simulcasts about an hour after they debuted in Japan, and it featured music from Kizuna Ai, who did the theme song. One other thing that a lot of people don't know is that it was actually produced in part by Hideki Anno, the creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion. It is absurd to think that such a big person worked on this TV anime that was essentially a sort of B-movie style Japanese sketch comedy show. Yeah, if you were unaware, he did work on it, and as Bunny said, it did not go over too well at release. That is very much true. But this is the first exposure for a lot of people outside of Japan to VTubers, and it actually featured over 50 other VTubers outside of those big 6, including some characters who have grown even further since this show started. Is that why they wore the uniform from Eva? Yes. Just to show you what this show is all about, I have a quick clip from it here. It is not going to make a lot of sense, I think.
冬休み終わったばっかりだよ。気が早いね。でも休み明けってつい次の休みがいつかなって考えちゃうよね。そうそう。十分休んだはず 次の休みを考えちゃうんだよね。休み中ってついついだらけちゃうしね。
ひなたちゃんはいつもだらけてるよね。
違うよひなちゃん、ゲームのイメトレしてるだけだし。
私は冬休み中も普段と同じきっちりとした生活をしていたので、そんなに変化はありません。
清楚な生活？
そうです。
清楚の音。
偉い、むしろエロいよ。そうですか？普通だと思いますけどね。しかもなんか暑い。
外見て、もしかして火山じゃない？暑いよ。僕暑いの苦手。我慢できない。なんで教室の外が火山なの？こんな暑さ死んじゃう。早くどっか避難しなきゃ。
なんてどこにするの？外は溶岩だらけだよ。外に出たら死んじゃうよ。
どうしよう。委員長？この状況わかってる？
これくらいなんですか？普段の生活と変わりませんよ。
いや、普段の生活じゃないよ。火山だよ。
火山くらいなんだってんですか？映画見てれば火山くらい出てきますよ。
暑い、死んじゃうよ。
サウナだと思えば普通です。
火山噴火した。
火山なんだから噴火しますよ。全くもう皆さん
Yeah, I would agree that the show is definitely ahead of its time. It is very much a show that captures kind of the essence of what these characters were in their solo content, and definitely captures that Japanese style of humor.
そんなこともできないんですか、あかりさん。
ねえ、あのマグマこっちに落ちてきてない？
そうですね、シロさん。火山爆発してマグマ飛び出したんだから、それくらい落ちます。
熱々にしてやるよ。やばい、このままだと当たる。許される。
うるさい。火山爆発してマグマ飛び出してこっちに落ちてきたんだから、普通死にます。当然です。ってあれ、普通に死にます。ダメじゃん。
今行くよ。
So, I think from watching that, you can kind of understand why a lot of people in the West were not immediately drawn to VTubers. They definitely had a very interesting style at the time that was mostly designed for a Japanese audience, and it didn't really land well with the American audience. That being said, a lot of people did find new VTubers to watch if they were already fans of them, and a lot of people were introduced to VTubers the first time through this show. Now, as we talk about post-2019, we have to talk about Hololive. Hololive grew exponentially and is sort of the zeitgeist for VTubing. They are the company that everyone looks towards to see what they do and try to emulate their success in their own content. English VTubing also grew in popularity in 2020. VList, which was a project to sort of document every single VTuber that spoke English, grew from about 150 people at the start of the year to well over 800 people, and it's at the point where they stopped trying to document everyone because you just could not keep up with the sheer number of people who are debuting. VShojo also is the first major US-based VTuber corporation, and I did not skip over Niji-sanji. We will be talking about them later. Kizuna Ai also is doing her first overseas collab with VShojo on her virtual concert tour this year, and actually they just started their overseas collab just now as well. Niji-sanji and Hololive have also continued to grow significantly. We're going to talk about Niji-sanji and Hololive as sort of the two big figureheads of VTubing in Japan at the moment. First, we're going to talk about Hololive. Hololive is an all-female VTuber group formed by a company called Cover Corp. They also have a male wing known as Holostars, but unfortunately it's orders of magnitude less popular, so we're going to focus on the core of Hololive. There are approximately 45 VTubers in Hololive in 3 groups, formerly 4. They have a group based in Japan, they have a group based in Indonesia, and they have a group that's based on English VTubers who are currently located all over the world. They feature many of the largest VTubers in the world. For instance, Gargura, one of the English-speaking VTubers in Hololive, was the second VTuber ever, I think, to reach 2 million subscribers on YouTube. Most of the top 10 is actually made up of Hololive VTubers, as well as some of the big 5 that we talked about earlier. They focus almost exclusively on live stream content. While they do have some pre-recorded content, it's mostly in the form of these animated sketches called holograph. They are not sort of traditional VTuber content in that sense. This is in a stark contrast to a lot of the other companies which do have some pre-recorded content and do focus a little bit on pre-recorded content. It's also important to note that while Hololive is the biggest company, they have been involved in some high-profile incidents as of late, which we're not going to go into right here. But there has been some drama regarding Hololive and their treatment of some of their content creators and some of their fans. So if you're interested, you can look at that later on. We're going to show some content from Hololive. So first things first, this is one of the biggest VTubers from their group known as Korone, and she's known for her attempts at speaking English. She's tried to do English speaking only streams, and she's grown to be one of the most popular content creators in Hololive, and also has become a viral TikTok sensation.
BGM okay? BGM okay? Let's go, amigo! Let's go! Okay. Queen? Oh, mushroom! Come on. Wow, big boy! This? Oh no. Okay, this? Oh no. Oh, kill! No! Oh, kill. You die. Oh, this. Oh, money!
So one of the reasons why I chose to focus on Korone here, at least, is because she has definitely become the VTuber with the most crossover appeal. She has definitely appealed to an English-speaking audience as well as a Japanese audience, and that "Wow, big boy" clip has turned into a pretty viral TikTok meme at this point. It's impossible to note how big Hololive has gotten without mentioning how much their influence has reached into other areas. And their first generation of English content creators is also a very, important group to talk about. I'm going to show one of the clips of their debuts. We're going to show Amelia Watson's debut, and if you were familiar with Hololive at the time, you'll know why.
Enhance! You guys know how big my brain is? It's quite big. We'll play a lot of puzzle games. We'll solve mysteries. Play detective games. My likes. My dislikes. My favorite anime. My favorite manga. It's time for a tea break.
One of the biggest notes that I would have about Hololive as a company is that they definitely focus on the sort of traditional Japanese idol aesthetic.
You guys have your cameras ready?
They really want to focus on not only the Japanese idol culture style of things, but also having idols or virtual talents who are multi-talented, and that really shows with their English-speaking audience as well.
Medicine.
They also don't hold back their VTubers' personalities, however.
Welcome back.
This is completely unedited, by the way. This is her initial debut.
It's over already? I'm his medicine. Was it good? Thank you, everybody.
So, Hololive is one side of the VTubing coin. The other side is really Niji-Sanji. And the reason why I say they're two sides of the same coin is because while they're both Japanese agencies focused on the sort of idol aesthetic, they have two very different approaches. While Hololive is much more focused on having small groups of talents with massive subscriber accounts and, sort of the traditional idol aesthetic, Niji-Sanji is a lot more open, I would say. First and foremost, they are the other major streaming group in Japan, and based on their capital alone, they are the biggest streaming group in Japan. They have significantly more members than Hololive, about 200 total, and they've also expanded a lot more than Hololive. They also feel much more similar to traditional streamers than Hololive's idol-based model, in that the streamers are allowed much more freedom to talk about things outside of their characters. They have a lot more freedom to talk about real-world issues and things that are going on in their own lives and things like that. They move away from the sort of AKB48, the perfume style of Japanese idols, more into a style of just a popular streamer. They were also the first company with a branch in Korea and India, and while this content was up to date yesterday, they actually announced a couple hours ago that they will be shutting down their Indian branch later this month, so that is unfortunate, but they were the first company to really create a branch in India. They also popularized the terms live and livers in the VTuber communities, which are still used to this day by some people who don't stream on YouTube. They don't want to be referred to as a VTuber. You'll also see terms like V-streamers, V-liver, things like that. I don't have any clips of Niji Sanji because if we were to go over some of them, we would be here forever. There are so many of them. But I did want to show just sort of the scale of their company. This is just the main group of HoloLive. They have a lot of people. They are certainly some pioneers of VTuber live streaming, and they also were one of the first companies to really focus on the 2D models. I agree. And yeah, they are a massive, massive company. You'll see at the bottom Tsukino Mito, who we saw in the Virtual San clip as well. And yeah, huge company, and still one of the biggest to this day. Kodemiko is actually interesting. So Kodemiko is an English-speaking independent VTuber, and up until recently, she was not the biggest VTuber. I've seen her a few times, around in the community. She was definitely active here. She makes all of her own stuff, which is incredibly impressive. She works with Unreal Engine, and she is just a force of nature. Honestly, she is an independent VTuber and the biggest English-speaking VTuber, period, I think, at the moment. So VShojo is another major group who were founded by The Gunrun, who is one of the founders of Twitch, and a guy named Mountain Dew, who is a YouTuber known for meme videos. They got together and decided to form an English-speaking VTuber group based on sort of the Japanese model of things. They feature 8 of the largest English-speaking VTubers in the world at the moment, notably Silverveil, Zentreya, Project Melody, Nyanners, Fruit, Vebe, Iron Mouse, and Hime Hajime. Some of these content creators you may recognize from their previous work, especially Nyanners and things like that. Yes, Mountain Dew, the YouTube poop guy. That is the CTO of the company. Couldn't make that up. VShojo is also very notable for having significantly more adult themes than other VTuber groups. Some of their content creators do have 18 plus content creation channels. They are definitely a step away from the sort of traditional VTuber ideal, and it's worked out very well for them. Yes, VTuber, the Kill la Kill the Snoop Dogg guy. Yeah, that guy, yes. I have a quick clip here from one of their content creators as well.
Hello, everyone. I am Natasha Nyanes, a very normal and polite girl with nothing strange about me. If we've got private parts, do we also have public parts? I love being destroyed emotionally. It feels good. Dirt water. I want her to spit in my mouth. I want to sample.
Yeah, so anyway, VShojo is definitely a content creation group that is modeled more along the lines of the original VTubers' personalities rather than focusing on sort of that pure idol aesthetic. I'm also going to talk about some other notable VTuber groups. We're not going to go very in-depth with them, but these are other groups to check out if you are interested in finding out more about VTubers and finding more VTubers that you may be interested in. The first group I would point out is Atelier Live, who are an artist-focused group of English VTubers. They have a lot of very big artists who have done work for major corporations. They have artists who are incredibly talented at what they do, and pretty much all of them live stream art as well. Out of all the independent VTuber groups in the US, they are pretty much by far the biggest one, without a corporate backbone. Sundaria is another one of these major groups. They have about 10 members across multiple generations, and they are a gaming-focused group in the same vein as Atelier Live. All fantastic people. Nori Pro is a Japanese VTuber group founded by a mangaka, Sukudani Norio, who frequently collaborates with HoloLive. They're sort of HoloLive adjacent. They're a little bit of a smaller group, but they are, produced by a mangaka, and as a result have done some interesting collaborations. In terms of other groups you may want to check out, Kimonos, Hanayori Girls Dormitory, Honey Strap, Omega Sisters, Voms, Animare, and Overidea are some major Japanese groups that I think are worth giving a look if you want to look into VTubers more. Can we get these slides after class? Absolutely. So that kind of wraps it up for the history of VTubing, the sort of where we are today. And now we're going to talk about what the process is like for becoming a VTuber. The most important thing to note is that VTubing can be an expensive and time-consuming process. It doesn't have to be, though. Depending on what you want to do or what you want to be as a VTuber, how much time you're willing to invest in learning the tools, you can become a VTuber for completely free. You could also spend a lot of money to jump to the head of the line and get your avatar as soon as possible. There's all sorts of ways of becoming a VTuber. There is no right or wrong way. I'm just going to show you some of the different ways that you actually can. The first thing that we have to talk about is 2D versus 3D. This is a constant debate in the VTuber community about whether or not you should be 2D, whether or not you should be 3D. We're going to talk about both sides and present the pros and cons of both. Sorry about that, one moment. So, first things first, let's talk about the 2D side. Generally speaking, a 2D model will be more expensive than a 3D model. This is because of the specialized nature of creating 2D models and the prices that people are willing to charge for the quality of work that they give. 2D is also very useful for making non-humanoid designs or making designs out of existing artwork and things like that. It's a lot easier to do that with 2D than it is with 3D. 2D is also favored by the larger corporate groups significantly more than 3D is, while there are still some companies that do 3D, and a lot of the big companies that focus on 2D also have 3D models for special occasions. Most of their content is produced in 2D. It's generally more expensive, generally a long... Oh, sorry, the first line was generally more expressive, not more expensive. 2D models are considered to be capable of showing a little bit more emotion thanks to the hand-drawn nature of them, which is important to note when you're looking for how you want to actually express yourself as your character. They're generally more expensive, and there's generally a longer wait to actually get a 2D model if you do commission it. And typically, if you want the best results with a 2D model, you will need to get an iPhone for that AR kit tracking. This improves the tracking quality to a significant extent with 2D models. In terms of 3D, it is a lot cheaper and faster to produce 3D in general than a 2D model. This is just thanks to the fact that 3D modeling has been an industry for a much longer time. The tools are a little bit more mature, and it's a lot easier to kind of plug and play things in 3D. You're also able to use a 3D model in games and VR pretty much out of the box. There is going to be some sort of configuration that you need to do. However, if you get a 3D model, you can import those into other games like VR Chat, Beat Saber, things like that, Craftopia. You can use your VRM models. One of the things to note is that there is a bit of a stigma associated with 3D models. The accessibility of 3D leads to a sort of perceived drop in quality, especially when you see a lot of people walking around with sort of default VRite avatars. This can lead to some people seeing 3D as inferior. It's not the case, but this is a stigma that sort of exists in the community to an extent. You can also use a webcam for tracking or use a VR tracking setup using trackers, like Vive trackers, for pretty good results in both cases. And typically with 3D, you'll have a much higher range of motion than 2D thanks to the fact that you can actually control the entire model, and it's not just a set of pre-recorded animations and features. Ria, thank you for the raid. So, going back to 2D, let's talk about the process of actually creating a 2D model. First, live 2D models are created in a 3-step process. If you're creating a 2D model, it's going to be in live 2D. There isn't really an alternative. First and foremost, you actually need to illustrate the character. This is going to be a multi-step process of drawing the character in a Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint-like program, any program that supports the layers. Why are layers important? Well, because the next step is going to be cutting that model into the component parts. This can be done in all sorts of different ways. Every person has their own way of cutting the model up, but this is something that you have to do to actually create a full live 2D model. You need to get the component parts separated out. Finally, you need to actually rig the model. This is going to be creating animation rules based on tracking. This isn't quite the same as traditional 3D rigging due to things like fill layers and having to work with the actual drawing that's on the screen. You may have to redraw some parts. This is a very extensive process and it can take a long time to do right. Typically, with 2D models, you'll have 2 or more people producing your avatar. The way that they refer to this in the Japanese community is your mama, or the person who makes your artwork, and your papa, or the person who does the rigging for your avatar. In some cases, you may find someone who does both. In most cases, you'll probably get your illustration done beforehand, and then the cutting and rigging will be done elsewhere. Or, the person will do the illustrating and the cutting, and then the rigging will be done elsewhere. There's any sort of number of subdivisions of this. One of the nice things, though, about 2D is that you can cut and rig pretty much anything. You could turn literally anything into a model, and I actually have an example of that later on in this slide deck. So really quick, just to show kind of the expressive nature of models, I have a clip of my friend Artemis of the Blue, just sort of dancing along to Pokemon music as it goes. And you can see kind of the range of motion that you can actually get out of a 2D model. and sort of that pseudo 3D effect that you get.
Alright. Let's fucking go.
Meant to click next before that. Here's another example of a rigged model. This is showcasing from Iron Vertex, who are kind of considered the best rigging group in the West in terms of making these models, and also over in Japan and China as well. This is sort of the quality of work that you can expect from a 2D rig as well. This rig was done by Brian Sui, a friend of mine, who is also, I believe, the head of Iron Vertex, and I'll show one of his other rigs after this, which is a little bit different. I don't know why the video corrupted at the end. This one, oh, damn it, it wasn't supposed to show the preview. This is something that he rigged as a joke for another friend of mine. But this just shows how you can rig literally anything with Live 2D. This is a still image from a TikTok video, a TikTok meme of a guy biting his lip, and they turned it into a fully rigged 2D model that you can actually use on stream the same way that you can use really any other type of model. And this just shows the power of Live 2D. Anything that you can draw, you can turn into a Live 2D model. That's the crazy thing. For 2D programs, your only real choice is Live 2D Cubism for making and rigging your model. It is the only mature option out of anything for Live 2D. You're going to have to stick with it. However, for tracking, you actually have a few different options. Face rig and animes is what people used to use back in the day. Don't use it. It's overpriced, it's expensive, it's missing a lot of features, it's unreliable, it's bad. Don't use face rig, don't use animes. If you need to fall back on something, this is your last resort. ParaPara Live, or PRPR Live, is pretty good. It's a camera tracking only option. It's fairly lightweight. It's definitely an option if you don't have that sort of iPhone tracking, and it's pretty good to use. Yeah, you can use Adobe Character Animator, and a lot of early VTubers also use that as well. And finally, VTube Studio is the industry standard at the moment. They have the best tracking on the market, and they can utilize an iPhone to actually track with ARKit, which will give you a bigger range of motion and a lot more control over your character. You can use an iPhone, I think it's X or later, for this sort of tracking, and you can connect it to the Steam app as well and offload that sort of tracking onto your phone. This can make it a little easier to run a 2D avatar as you're streaming and offload a little bit of that, computer workload. Now for 2D, there are some drawbacks that we need to talk about. The first and foremost is that the cost of 2D on the whole tends to be a bit more expensive, with some of the models that you saw, especially in the things that we saw earlier, being in the thousands of dollars. They are not cheap. But you get the quality that you pay for. The quality does vary wildly, though. Again, this is another issue with Live 2D not being a fully matured program. There are some groups, such as I point out specifically Iron Vertex, is the group that I'm most familiar with, as being incredibly talented. They make incredibly high quality models every single time, but they also have an incredibly long wait list. Their commissions open up, I think, once every 2 months or so, and you need to have your model ready to go in order to get in. So it is definitely hard to make sure that you find a rigger who is quality and is going to be able to do the work in a timely manner. Another drawback of 2D models is that you cannot use these in VR Chat or Beat Saber. These are exclusively for VTubing. You may be able to use them in like an RPG Maker style game or something else that supports Live 2D, but you're not going to be able to import them into games as your own avatar. You're also a little bit limited. Unlike a 3D model, you can't just apply a new animation that uses the same rig. You have to use the pre-made animations that were already programmed into your model. You'll also have facial expression toggles, which if you want to add a new facial expression, again, unlike 3D, you can't just create new blend shapes. You have to go in and hand draw the new facial expression. For 3D, the process is a little bit different. There's sort of two different processes. The first one we're going to talk about is the faster and cheaper way of making a 3D model, which is using a program called Vroid. It's a free model making software created by the company Pixiv, aka Booth. It's free to use, available on Steam. This is what my model is actually created in. It comes with a pre-made base model and textures that you already have a commercial license to use, so no issues there. You can actually modify the body shape and dimensions using a bunch of different sliders in the program, which really simplifies the process of building out that base avatar. You can also use pre-made clothing options that can be retextured. You can find new clothing textures on Booth, either being sold or for a price or free to download. And this is from Japanese and English-speaking content creators. You also have full control over the sort of hair particles and things like that as well. You can make pretty much anything that your mind can dream up. This also exports into the open source VRM format, which is pretty much the de facto format for 3D VTuber models at the moment, and is compatible with all major 3D programs and game engines by default. You can use these models in Unreal, in Unity. You could probably even put them into Godot if you really felt like it. I don't know why you would, but they are very compatible. These are also typically significantly cheaper than from scratch models. You're not going to be paying into the thousands of dollars for a VROID model. At least I hope you're not. If you are, you're probably getting scammed. I'm going to show an example of another VROID model. This is a friend of mine showing off what you can do with a leap motion if you own one of those.
My hands aren't tracking properly. There we go. Nice and clean. Wow! Hoo ha, hoo ha. All good. All right, but wait, hold on. Testing tracking. I am testing my tracking. I am not doing anything sexual. It's a test. I am testing.
So that's another example of a high-quality VROID model, and some of the things you can do. You can use a leap motion to actually get control of your hands and get finger tracking pretty much out of the box with any of these sort of models. The alternative to VROID, though, is the more expensive alternative, which is to have a custom-made model. You can use pretty much any sort of model. The price and design will vary wildly because these are just a 3D model that you commission and get output into either an FBX or a VRM format. Typically, you'll want to have the models end up in the VRM format so they're compatible with everything, but if you don't want to go the VRM route, you can also go for the FBX format, so you can use it with programs like Suva, which we'll talk about later. This will require a little bit more configuration, but also opens you up to using things like custom shaders out of the box. One of the people that we talked about in VShojo earlier, Silvervale, actually has a custom-made model that will show off in the bottom right corner.
Oh no, what have we done?
And you can be pretty expressive with these 3D models. You can add any sorts of accessories and things that you want, whereas VROID is a little bit more limited.
We broke everything! Literally everything is broken.
So, when it comes to 3D, you can rig and model a 3D model in any program. If you use Maya, if you use Blender, if you are familiar with any of these programs, you can start right now. You'll generally want to stick to a more humanoid rig or focus on the VRM standard for your rig and things like that if you really want them to be directly compatible with everything. But you can go as weird as you want. You can make it as custom as you want. If your model's in a VRM format, you should consider the following programs for tracking. VSeeFace is the de facto standard for 3D tracking. It has facial expression detection, it has eye tracking, leap motion support. It is probably the best 3D program on the market. I would also recommend Luppet as a good VSeeFace alternative. If you also want to have that sort of hand control and things like that, it's fantastic as well. More expensive than VSeeFace, I believe it's a $50 license, but a lot of people swear by it over VSeeFace. VMagic Mirror is also a fantastic choice if you don't want to ever expand into using a leap motion. Again, fairly cheap license, and it is very lightweight on the computer, which is the main benefit of using VMagic Mirror over any of these other programs. If your model's not in a VRM format, you should really consider using Streamer Virtual Avatar. It requires a lot more setup and is primarily focused on using VR tracking, but it can work with models outside of VRM formats and features full support of Unity's custom asset bundles, as well as built-in support for the Tobii eye tracker if you do have that as well. Now, I'd also like to talk about some of the drawbacks of 3D. It's not that 3D is better, there are also some major drawbacks of 3D. Setting up a 3D model can require a lot more technical knowledge than 2D, to an extent. You'll need to know some things about game engines, you might need to know some things about modeling, texturing, shaders, all that sort of things to actually get the most out of your 3D model. VROID models, again, do have some stigma attached. Because they are so widespread, they're easy to use, they also have a sort of, stigma. What was VRM again? VRM is an open source model format developed by companies over in Japan that is compatible with pretty much everything. It's a very easy to export format. If you have a model that you can get into Unity, you can immediately export it as a VRM file. Another major issue with 3D is that if you use your avatar in games like VRChat, chances are it's going to be stolen at some point and leaked onto the internet. This is a big problem for people like Project Melody, who had some of their VRChat models completely leaked onto the internet, thanks to things like model stealers. So you will want to make sure that you're using it appropriately and maybe keeping it out of those multiplayer style games. 3D tracking also tends to be a lot heavier to run compared to 2D tracking, as there's a lot more GPU usage available. Again, just something to think about. 3D physics can also cause clipping issues, which can be hard to diagnose and hard to fix. Just about to mention her, yeah. Back when she first started, I think it was in February or March of last year, she had a meetup in VRChat with some of her Patreon subscribers, and as a result, someone actually stole her model and leaked it onto the internet. Thankfully, it wasn't the full model that she uses for all of her content. It was one that was specifically made for VRChat, but that's still not something that you want to see happen with your intellectual property. So, finally, some conclusions. Becoming a VTuber can be an expensive and long process, but it doesn't have to be. Vroid exists to provide sort of that quick budget option for people who really just want to try this out and see if they really like doing it. It's something that you can set up in a couple days and be ready to go almost immediately, and it's pretty user-friendly. You can also expand out from there to custom-made 3D and 2D avatars that can bring some extra quality and expression to your streams. People become virtual for all sorts of different reasons. They might like the community, they may enjoy the sort of, anonymity that using a 3D model provides over using a webcam. There's any sort of motivation that you can use to actually become a VTuber. And no matter what your budget, becoming a VTuber is a good way to just kind of add a little more spice to your streams if you're finding yourself stagnating. And I think with that, that's the end of the presentation, so we'll open the floor to any questions that we have. That went almost an hour exactly. That was perfect timing.
Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah, I agree with what Bunny said. Don't use it as a crutch. You can spend as much money as you want on the highest quality model. It can be absolutely amazing looking. It can be perfectly animated, but spending money on a model is not going to buy you a personality. You need to make sure that you're using the model to add to what you provide on your stream.
Does your model have? Are you able to use the hands on your model?
I am. I don't know where I put my leap motion. It's somewhere on my table right now. I typically don't run it when I'm streaming, just because I typically play games while I'm doing it, and running a leap motion and a model on the same computer as I'm running games and OBS Studio tends to kind of overload my computer a little bit. Who do you recommend showing clips of to people who want to try getting into VTubers? I typically show people the VTubers that I enjoy. So I'll stick to, maybe some of the more popular HoloLive VTubers. If I want to show people who might be hesitant to look into the Japanese side of things, I'll stick to English-speaking VTubers. So I'll stick to people like Mira Pink, people like Silverveil, Project Melody, that sort of group of people. I'll stick to some of my friends. Artemis of the Blue is one person that I definitely show to a lot of people. You can really show anyone. There's literally thousands of VTubers. Anything that you're interested in, there's probably a VTuber who is also out there doing that exact same thing. If you have someone who's interested in, anime reviews, find a VTuber who does anime reviews. If you have people who are interested in, gaming content, Skara, for instance, is a big gamer. He actually sponsored our Minecraft server for the next 2 months. So, shout outs to him. There's all sorts of different VTubers. The biggest place I can recommend is actually, there's a guy on Twitter and Twitch named Domo Ariga Thanks, and he interviews a lot of different VTubers. And I would say, if you want to find out about all sorts of different VTubers, just go and watch some clips of his channel. Go and check out all the different people who he's shown off. He typically shows off some of the bigger English-speaking VTubers, and it's fantastic. would a PNG tuber fit in your VTuber definition given the live capture clause? Not necessarily, and I think the reason for that is that the PNG doesn't really move. But generally speaking, I've seen that people who use a PNG to stream with are just waiting for their avatar to be finished later on. I would still consider that being a VTuber, but I do think that at some point you do need to move to that sort of, live capture avatar. Going back to the history, does 22/7 fall under the VTuber umbrella? Yes, Sally Amaki in particular is the one member of 22/7 I'm super familiar with, and her content as a VTuber definitely makes sense. They played a character, they used a virtual avatar, they recognized the fact that they were virtual. That falls as a VTuber to me. Granted, she's much more known for her in-person content, and 22/7 is definitely more known for sort of the actual idols and personality behind the group, but they definitely do fall under the VTuber umbrella to an extent. For those who are unaware, 22/7 is a Japanese idol group who also had a TV anime, and they use 3D models in their music. Any other questions, chat? We have like another half an hour. We could be here all day.
So this was a lot of information. It's been awesome. So I remember. So have you heard of like It's a Gundam?
It's a Gundam. Yes, I do know them.
So not a VTuber, right?
It's a Gundam. I haven't actually watched their content much. So I don't think I'd be able to tell just off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm vaguely familiar with them.
Yeah, I remember them in the past popping up on my like YouTube channel. For some reason, I watched a few of them. I think he got in a fight with Pokimane or something like that.
I do remember that. What are some of the best models you've seen to date? I really like Kizuna Ai's models in particular. Her models are definitely very well made. They're high quality. The tracking on them is absolutely absurd. Code Miko as well. She makes all of her own content. Her model is modifiable in real time, which is insane and something that no one else has really tried to do in the VTuber space. Mira Pink, for instance, made all of my, or a couple of my original models, and I really enjoy the work that she does, as well as the models that she uses. Jay Genomu and Atelier Bunny are also very well-known 3D artists. For 2D, the people who did Artemis of the Blues models are fantastic. Yueko does some fantastic models as well. There's a lot of different artists who have worked on VTubers, and they're all fantastic. Any opinions on Snuffy's model, the new one or the old one? New? I think it's good. I really enjoyed her rebrand, so I do enjoy the 2D models that are really well animated. Have you considered moving to 2D versus 3D, or do you prefer 3D? I personally prefer 3D. I think that the move to 2D kind of feels like, 2 steps backwards from where we were. In the early days of content, there was very high quality motion capture. There were 3D models that were very articulate, they were expressive, they were well animated, and I feel like moving to 2D removes a lot of that. You take away a lot of different options that you can do with your content. I do a lot of VR streaming, or I have in the past, and if I went to 2D, I wouldn't be able to use the same model for that. And I don't like the idea of having to maintain 2 models, having to pay for 2 separate models, 2 separate commercial licenses, things like that. I'm a VTuber on a budget. I am not the biggest content creator. I can't pay for my VTubing model with the money that I make from Twitch. I can't pay for all that content. So all of this is done, as a hobby. And, if I had thousands of dollars to spend on a hobby, I'd probably buy a car first. I think that's a much more practical expense.
So you've been doing this for quite a while. Let me ask you this. What do you see as any new upcoming trends or changes you see happening in the VTuber community in the next few years?
I definitely see them. Well, I think the biggest thing is that the trend's going to start to blow up in the US, but I think it's going to be more of a bubble than anything. We're starting to see that now, where Code Miko's been blowing up and becoming sort of a celebrity on the same level as the Ludwigs, the other people who participated in PogChamps with her, these sort of big events, and she's sort of the first VTuber to really break into the mainstream, uh, sort of the mainstream Twitch consciousness. Maybe not the mainstream media consciousness, but I think that that's the first step as we start to see VTubers start to get more popular in America as content creators on Twitch and things like that. We might see them starting to move into more traditional forms of media. And then from there, it's just a matter of time before the whole thing just kind of blows up to a massive extent and then starts to die back down. And I think it'll return to it being a bit more of a niche community in the future. VTubing definitely started out as a group of people who were really interested in Japanese culture and sort of the things that were going on over there. And since then, it's definitely evolved more so out of that. But I've always been wary of sort of how fast VTubing has been growing. It doesn't feel like, it should be exploding this much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty new to this, so I'm hearing a lot of this for the first time, the 2D versus 3D, all the tech coming from Japan and converting over to the English language, and then I hear like and even Bunny VTuber saying in the comments that Miko's tech is really a high bar being set, and you mentioned a lot of that's done in Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see that as any kind of a revolutionary type of a thing, or is that just something that she has just done exceptionally well?
I hope it's the trend going forward. I mean, most technology for VTubing, at least in the 3D space, is done entirely in Unity, and I think that that's kind of holding people back. The stuff that CodeMiko's done with Unreal Engine has been a lot more live interaction. She has a lot more technology for actually like modifying models in real time. Like she can grow different parts of her character in real time. There's like sliders and things like that that can control the shape of everything. She has her chat show up on her forehead, just kind of scrolling past. And it's all these sort of different ways of interacting with the avatar that we haven't really seen as much of in Unity, but we have seen in Unreal Engine. And I think just going forward, Unreal Engine is kind of the way to go, I think, in the end.
And is she mainly in her own like virtual environment, or does she do like green screen stuff with hers?
She has a virtual environment, yeah. She modeled an entire virtual environment, built out all sorts of different things, and it's fully interactable. She can go and pick up things in the environment and interact with them. That's not something that's particularly new. Mira Pink actually had that back in 2018 with her sort of Unity setup and everything like that. But that is something that makes it feel a lot more real. That's also true. Miko's tracking hardware is like $30,000 as well. It's industry standard like tracking software and hardware.
Did she start out with that, or did she build up?
Started out with that. I believe she's an Unreal Engine developer as like her main job, and then moved into VTubing as sort of like a fun side project. But she's definitely benefited a lot from that sort of high quality tracking, and has expanded on that greatly. Yeah, as Bunny said, she had a lot of experience to lean on, and she also has posted job openings for more people to come and work on her her model and her production setup as well as like paid positions. That being said, there's also Japanese programs that kind of do a similar thing. The biggest one is Reality, which is like a collaborative tracking application that you can use like mocap suits or VR tracking with, but it's mostly used by Japanese VTubers and doesn't really have much support outside of Japan, to my knowledge. Are there any more questions, or should we just call it there, do you think?
Bueller. No, this has been phenomenal. This is a lecture that I've been looking forward to the entire semester. So thank you so much for all the effort you put into this.
I'm glad. Yeah, this is a fun presentation to give, and I'd always be happy to come back and talk about VTubers again.
Yeah, we will definitely call you back in the future. I think I'm teaching this class again next semester.
Perfect.
So we're doing it again. We're doing it again. I think it might actually be an official class next semester too.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, right now it's a special topics, but I think you can do that twice and then it needs to be an official class.
Mhm.
Alan Guy says, is this being archived?
The VOD will be up for 2 weeks. I could download it and upload it to YouTube or somewhere if that's something that people are interested in. But yeah, there's the VODs automatically save.
Yeah, and Cable, if you don't want to host it, I mean, I'm happy to put it onto my YouTube channel as well, with all the other class stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, I was looking for an excuse to blow up my YouTube channel anyway, so we'll see what
You
happens.
should. Well, you should. This is really valuable content that I could see like a lot of people looking back on.
Yeah, and if you're interested in sort of the more what's it called? The more academic side of VTubing, I'll also link a friend of mine, Mila, who is a researcher over in Switzerland, who does a lot of research into VR, robotics, and things like that. She's also a VTuber herself, but she's also written a lot of academic papers about VTubing and sort of the culture around it and how it differs between Japan and the US. And so that's something that if you're interested in the academic side and studying VTubing and things like that, definitely go and check out her content. She has a link to her publications in her Twitter bio.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So missed the first 10 minutes, but definitely check it out. Yeah, go back and watch it, and then Cable will post this again. For anyone in the class, have a wonderful week. I have an assignment posted up on Canvas that you can check out for next week, which is our last official day of class meeting. So it's been a rocking semester. This is definitely a highlight to kind of end the semester on.
Yeah, awesome. And I think we'll send you guys over to another VTuber stream after this. So like I mentioned earlier, the big collab between VShojo and some of the biggest Japanese VTubers is actually happening right now on Twitch. So we'll send you over to one of their streams really quick. This is an actual class? Yes, this is EAE 4900, 6900, the game streaming class at the University of Utah.
Believe it or not, it's a thing. Nobody believes it when we tell.
I've had to explain that I teach a class on streaming or help teach a class on streaming multiple times. And people are like, oh, so like how to make streaming content, like how to engineer that. And I'm like, no, streaming on Twitch. They never understand.
Yep. It makes sense if you're in the class, trust me. All right, everyone have a good night. Yeah, let's raid this let's raid Nyaners.
Yep. Everyone go say hello, and yeah, this is a pretty historic collaboration, so go check it out. We'll see you guys next time. Am I late for the lecture? Yeah, a little bit. Just a little bit.